Yeah,
You're not playing the role of
Okay.
big brother on it.
This is the
You
ad
don't need another
hoc
one.
committee's meeting for January 8th. And all the board members are present, or the committee members are present, except for Lisa DiPiano. I want to welcome everybody. First order of business is, can we accept the minutes from our prior meeting?
We have two sets of minutes we need to accept.
Okay.
The 3rd of December and last Monday.
Okay. Let's start with the 3rd of December. Do I hear a motion to approve those? Or do we approve those? Okay. And the minutes from the public meeting we had on the 5th.
I'm not going to vote since I wasn't there.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Before we take public comment, let's reiterate what we were discussing off the record about how we're going to proceed. And what have we decided on that? Are we going to?
Well,
Yes.
could I say, get back into that discussion, but could we first, the other thing I'd written is, given the limited time that 3 of our members have to go to another meeting, that we quickly go through the agenda and maybe put time periods on them, so we make sure we get through that.
I think rather than do that, I would rather say that the meeting will be called at 7:45, because I would hate to restrict the conversation on something that's urgent
Well, I guess
by an
the-
artificially imposed, like,
It's not,
10 minutes.
what I'm asking is where our priorities are for the meeting, given that we definitely
Right.
do have a time frame. We can be flexible, but just
All right.
as we go into a subject matter. just-
Okay, does anybody else have anything to say on that?
I think having a time structure is useful. We can always agree to give ourselves more or less time.
Okay.
But I think that's helpful because oftentimes we end up, the last item is shorter. So-
Okay. Then, why don't we, devote 5 minutes to public comment?
How much do you need, Jesus?
Does anybody have anything to
I
say?
have a short thing, but it might.
Can I write on it?
I guess yeah. But
Okay.
5 minutes is more than enough.
All right. And then what are we going to do next? We're either going to discuss the schedule or timeline, or are we going to consider the input we receive from the public forum? What's
I don't care.
David?
I'd say just take care of the housekeeping stuff first, just because I
Do the
think it'll be
scheduling.
quick. I think it'll be.
Yeah.
The
I think it'll be
schedule?
quick, but-
My, yes, I'm happy to do the schedule. My priority is, I think, is planning out the next 3 months. That's what I think most people have to do.
And under 4, A and B are pretty much
Related.
related, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We can't do one without the other.
All right. So, then let's begin. Are there any public comments? Jesus?
Yeah, I'd like to speak back to part of the recommendation for 10 in the Charter Change Committee.
If you have a specific thing you want to talk about, I suggest you wait until we're talking to you about that thing as part of our discussion.
Okay.
Everybody else?
I think that would be useful. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Do you have a general comment about the thing you wanted to make, the hearing, or was it just one specifically?
Or
It was kind
a
of
number.
specific.
Okay.
Okay. Good. So,
Join us on the comment.
then the next thing is, how are we going to proceed? What should our timeline be?
When does this go, what's the date that it goes? to?
March 5th.
March
March
5th.
fifth.
I brought a calendar so we could look and count dates and stuff like that if we want to.
The council meeting
I have
is
so
on the
many,
5th.
so
That's
Yes.
correct.
Which means we need to have it done on the Friday before, which is technically.
Yeah, but we could do it like we did the draft.
Right.
I mean, the
That's right.
draft.
So we don't have to have it done
It's
until.
not, yeah, I still don't think they have to vote on it,
Yeah.
so we're just turning it in, so
Yeah.
I don't,
I think it might be good to do it.
Okay, it could be the Friday, then it would have to be Friday, February 27th, at noon would be the drop dead date.
Drop dead now.
For the packet.
Yep.
Okay.
Andy, did you have any suggestions?
Well, I guess it brings us back to the question of what do we want to do between then and now and then, which is, do we want to have any more forums? And when we're saying, when you say forum, what do we mean? And as I was starting to say before the meeting, I imagine that it doesn't have to be all meetings in a public meeting room. We could be doing the radio, as Lisa had talked about. We could do a call-in at the studio at NC, you know, we could, would like to do something with the Florence Business Association. I feel like we kind of
Sure.
neglected that end of town. See if they would be interested in hosting a meeting. But I feel like we need to have that conversation, and maybe you've had it. And,
We have not.
Okay, and,
Not with me.
how much is enough? And what did people have in mind?
Alex?
Who's running the meeting here? They got my hand out.
Well,
You can't see, you gotta stand back a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'm sort of yielding to
Oh, all right.
to Wendy because Wendy, it was her suggestion, and I thought maybe she had an idea what she wanted to
I
do
did,
with it.
and now he wants to talk.
Yeah. No, he asked who was running the meeting, so I was explaining.
Sightlines here. All right, I thought a little bit about this, and I really think that we should go after targeted audiences. That this is an interesting conversation, that certainly neighborhood groups, business association are possibilities. There's the Jerry Budger's, the sort of
Association,
combination of all of
associations.
the neighborhood organizations. I think that it would be really helpful to go after people who are on committees now. Committee chairs, people who are active in the city who may have input that we haven't gotten.
We did send an email to all of them about this forum.
And we
Right,
did,
and
and
only
we,
David
and we did
Rackhouse
get a
showed
few
up.
pieces of feedback.
But it's specifically aimed at committee people. We have a major recommendation that involves them, several recommendations. I think that it might be interesting to have one that's principally the administration, the mayor, Wayne, Andy, maybe Terry.
Can I ask you a question of clarification on what you're saying? Are you suggesting multiple events? Or are you
Yes.
suggesting targeting multiple people to bring them to one?
No, I'm talking about multiple events.
Okay, well, that.
Can I want to piggyback on that suggestion, maybe offer a way to do that. I agree, but I don't think they have to be a full committee event every time. I think we could agree to have representatives do almost like a show and tell, road show type thing, and have 2 or 3 people go out to various places. And now that we've established sort of like a protocol for it, what we can concentrate on walking out of each meeting is just recommendations of things that are missing or additions or deletions. And I think that gives us a greater flexibility and ability to go into the nooks and crannies of the city, so to speak. If we do it in these big official meetings, I think it's awkward. We've done one, but now I think we really need to go out and, as you said, get invited to the different neighborhood groups and other venues.
And see perhaps if we can get them on at least videotape. Video, whatever the technology is at this point.
I know we'll be taped at the North Street Association. So
Yeah.
Right, exactly, Adams.
I have a question. Exactly what would be the purpose of meeting with city representatives? At this point, anyway. Obviously, we want to get their reactions to the suggestions. But it seems to me that what our major task is now is to outreach to the public, to have them become involved in decision-making, rather than talking to the decision makers. It seems that our focus has...
Well, I was going to continue on down my list. I think that there are people who have been very involved in this process I'm thinking of Mary Casper, I'm thinking of Fran Volkman, I'm thinking of Joel, and a whole layer, and going through that, particularly that original list, and looking as another focus. I think that the purpose of this is to keep this conversation alive with people who have a real interest in it. I think that process expecting the public to stay interested in an abstract conversation about process has not worked particularly. What you want are the people who are really interested and who have a stake in this to comment on where we are now, and I think hopefully make it public so the public comments on that conversation. But the purpose is to gather some momentum so that when it comes to the council, it comes with not urgency, but with, you know, a real mandate to look at this and do something.
You know, and maybe it's just me, I'm just seeking clarification, Alex, but reaching out to the people you mentioned, private citizen, I think that's great, and I think I was frankly a little sad to see that they weren't here at our last conference, because they put so much effort and time into this, and they were, but what my concern is, not even a concern, the real question I have is, if we were to schedule a meeting with decision makers, like committee members and city officials, what would be the purpose of that?
I'm not thinking every city, the mayor, because now we have recommendations, they have something, instead of going to them in the abstract, you have a real set of recommendations. So you can begin to understand, you know, what the reaction is going to be when this becomes official. But again, to start this conversation, which I think should be of interest, will be of interest to a broad range of people. I think a lot of people would be interested in how the mayor reacts to these. I'll let Michael talk. I haven't thought it all the way out.
Well, I think there's a couple of possible benefits. One is to get a sense of what their reaction is, and if there's anything that they see as being potential problems or roadblocks. So we have a chance to respond to that and kind of avoid a last-minute snafu that we hadn't anticipated. It is going to take, you know, the cooperation and participation of them, so this is continuing that dialogue. And another is the whether or not there's any financial concerns that would, and we know there are financial concerns. What I'm thinking is the comment of one of the people who attended our forum, saying, I can't support any recommendations that would be adding positions or other substantial items to the budget. I think that's a legitimate concern. So the question comes, what happens to those, the ideas that were behind having a paid position, for example? Because if you drop that paid position, what are the other ways we can address those? So that, and we haven't really had that discussion on some of them, other ways to look at that. And we may get ideas from interacting with various elected officials, some of the key department heads and elected officials. So those are some of the possible benefits. I don't see it's a top priority. I think I go with Alex, wanting to get out into the community more.
I think we asked all the city boards and department heads about their practices, not all department heads, but, and I think it would be a great courtesy if we just send them our recommendations. Say, here's our direct recommendations, take a look at them, anything you don't like or you think it's problematic, let us know. We don't need to get all of them together in one room now. We got to get final recommendations, get the city council on board, and really have something that's going to be substantial about this. Otherwise, just see it as one more time-wasting committee that they have to go to. So I think that we should send them, all the department heads and the board and committee and board members, all of them should get the draft recommendations. And they can respond to us as they will. I understand Alex's desire to get Mary and Fran and Joel and stuff involved. I think that they are as involved now as they're going to be. So I don't think that we're going to have a meeting that they all probably knew about the meeting on Monday night. They have been following our stuff. I mean, if we can find other ways to get public input, and I like the Florence Civic and Business idea. And the group of all groups hasn't met in 7 months. So maybe it could be resurrected, but it just hasn't gone anywhere, so,
How about Ward 3?
sure,
State
but,
Village Association meets every month.
yeah, well, so do we wanna just go and talk to one ward association?
But why don't we have a group, why don't we try to reconvene a group of all groups?
Right,
meeting?
but that, all I'm saying is we only have 6 weeks to do that.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
I'm not done yet, Jim.
okay.
Um,
I saw his hand.
And so, I mean, I feel like we've done outreach, and the response has been sometimes pretty good, often less than that. And to hope that we're gonna get, some guy's gonna come and say, or woman's gonna come and say, here's the secret formula, that magic spice that's gonna solve all your problems, just isn't true. So I think, we should, I'm not interested particularly in doing more outreach. If we can find venues and we want to do it, that's okay with me, but I don't have any great expectation it's going to yield eureka moments for any of us.
Jesus?
I have an idea that might address this, or at least part of this. I think that a member of this committee should specifically make an appeal to parts of the public by posting the list of recommendations, as they are on the Paradise City Forum listserv, and basically accompanied with an appeal that here they are, we'd like some feedback and comment on the recommendations. Most of the groups that you guys have been talking about just now are all members of the Paradise City Forum listserv, and I think that might be an easy way to try to get a conversation going.
I'm just skeptical that people are going to answer us.
Well,
That's
I
an
may
easy
be
thing.
wrong.
No,
I'd
That's
be
an easy
happy
thing to
be
do,
wrong.
what he suggests.
I
Nothing
actually,
It doesn't
to
involve a
lose.
meeting, it
Yeah.
doesn't,
Nothing to lose.
it doesn't involve a meeting, and you're all right, there
So we
is
can
a
do that, no
likelihood that you
problem.
won't get
No problem.
feedback, but at the same time, you can also make a more direct and genuine appeal, and that'll help,
Yeah.
bridge that
Yeah.
gap. If not just posting on the Paradise City Forum, come to this meeting, but posting the 10
recommendations up,
recommendations
sure.
themselves and saying, we're at the point where we really like feedback on these, and we would be responsive to it, but we do need the feedback.
As a means of addressing the concerns that I've heard here, what would the committee think of doing as Jesus suggested, and making a big pitch on the forum, and setting a date by which people should respond, and if they respond, indicate whether or not they'd be willing to attend a public forum. If we get no response, then we don't schedule a forum. If we do, then we schedule a forum. And in addition to that, we could contact the people that we've identified as being very actively involved in this process and ask them. Yes?
I'm more comfortable with what I interpret to be Alex's suggestion of us going out and trying to make contact with different groups, even if it's representatives from this group going and presenting to various forums. And I think there are some places where we could get some audiences. And I don't say, I'm not against that, but I don't want to depend solely on that. And
Right,
if
I'm not
we have
asking
no
that.
takers, then
Yeah,
that's fine,
yeah.
we've made the effort. But I don't want to write it off. I think there's a lot of merit to what Alex said. And, for example, we could ask to be put on the agenda for the Democratic City Committee when they're meeting in 2 weeks or whatever to present. We would get a big group of activists in the city.
Right.
We could review it. So I think there's a number of things like that we could do. A number of groups meet on a semi-regular basis, and we could do that.
Right.
Excuse me, Ken?
I think you kind of acknowledged that the shortcoming in the committee was that you couldn't get the people from the May 13th forum, to really come to meetings to sort of follow up on recommendations. And I could see these people going to these meetings, in the first place, going there with ideas for specific recommendations, because that's what they had them generalized on the board, but they came with ideas and things that they were unhappy with. They got a chance to write one sentence on the board, but I think they came with more. They had more, to say. And I think that you said the inReach was very successful, or that was the most successful part. But I think the public really hasn't had an opportunity to weigh in. And of course, they did have an opportunity at your last meeting, but those were on general recommendations, so I could see a lot of those people staying home. But I think you even mentioned in part of your reason for convening tonight was perhaps to continue the debate whether you were going to be making general or specific recommendations. And I thought even from the outset with City Council that they expect you, or somebody has to make specific recommendations, and I think the City Council gave a pretty long time frame and sort of chose people to be part of this committee who had the expertise to come in and have the public debate, their ideas and say this is going to work or this is not going to work. And I think that's the only way that it's going to be successful, whether you guys do it or that's the only way it's going to happen if there are some specific recommendations. So I think you really do need to have, a couple of forums anyway to have these people come in and at least now that the time is so short, you certainly can't make specific recommendations on all of these things, but you could take one, like Bob and others had mentioned. If the City Council doesn't take the opportunity to revise the rules and start making some changes for best practices, then none of the other committees are going to do. So maybe we start with specific recommendations for the City Council, or at least say that this is something that we will do. And any of the people that you feel like you want to reach out to can attend, Fran Volkman or Mary Casper or anyone else from the neighborhood association can attend, these forums and express themselves just as anyone else, So I don't think you should narrow a focus, but I think you should, make this open to the public and really make specific invitations to people that you would like to have be there, but not sort of close it off.
Wendy?
All right. There's pieces of what everyone has said that I'm feeling drawn to. I want to say just generally, I think we did an amazing thing in the course of this year, and I'm very proud of the product. And I've only heard positive things, and maybe the people who aren't happy with it aren't getting in touch, but I've got positive feedback. I've seen it on in different places. So, and I feel like we've done our work. And so I'm leaning more toward Bob's comments about limiting what we do next. I have some concerns about what you raised, Michael, about breaking up and in smaller groups, pieces, certain members, not the entire committee. We each have different perspectives. I mean, we did come to a general consensus on these things, but unless we actually have a real format that we work at to make sure that there's consistency from each of these meetings by the select members who, run those meetings, we're going to have, I don't feel as comfortable with that as if all of us were at least expected to participate in all of those. I feel like we've done our best, and to now use this limited time to try to set up a bunch of meetings, it doesn't appeal to me. I like the idea of using other forums to do that. As I said, and I would like to do at least one in Florence. But I would like to look at other opportunities, low tech or high tech, whatever, but low meeting involvement, organizing, effort things. I think Jesus's idea about posting the recommendations on the forum would be a way to do that. I agree with you. I think we should set a date for the end of comments. That will give us time to look at everything. But I don't feel we need extensive or more than one more meeting. This is, as I said months and months ago, I was looking at this 90-day period as equivalent to the public comment period on regulations, where, of course we want to do a best practice a little bit better than they do things usually, but we put them out there, we've gotten publicity, we're going on the radio again Monday, correct?
Right.
We've done our best without staff, with a lot of other things to do, to put something together that I think we can be proud of. And I feel like we're passing the ball to the council, half of you. But I'm also wondering if we should think about suggestions for implementation or some kind of bridge between our work and how we give it to the council as an alternative to maybe doing too much now in the way of public input that I feel is maybe some of the work that the council should be doing. So I said a lot of different things, but I mostly want to say I don't think we should go into a large community outreach effort at this point. I feel like one other public meeting and looking at other ways to get the information, and I prefer to do that.
Alex?
I think that, well, I don't agree with either Bob or Randy about the, between what we should be doing now, between now and March. This is the end for this committee, it's the last. The recommendations have really just gotten out there. I think everybody overestimates the attention span, how long it takes people to begin to read them, look at them. It would be nice to maybe get them published early on in the paper, if we could get them just to do that, just take out a page, just do the recommendations. It's, we don't have a lot of time, but I would go back. I think that we could split that list. I think there were only maybe 50, 60 people, 70 people at that meeting, the original meeting. Split that list up and call those people, every one of them. Say,
We
here are
emailed them all
recommendations.
about the public hearing on Monday night. Is that not correct?
Yeah.
Anybody whose email address we had,
And the
we
Google
informed
group.
about the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the same as
Not the same as
people.
calling, I understand, but
And maybe set this far enough ahead. I mean, we called people and expect them, the next, we met on the 28th.
Right.
The meeting is the 5th. We have really all of February. Maybe not breaking up into a lot of, but one more kind of, well, I have two thoughts. One more major, try and get, that's what this group is about, is outreach, is to try and get, by hook or crook, a reaction to the recommendations themselves before we turn it over to council.
Michael?
Couple of thoughts, let's see if I random, let's see if I can remember them all. One is, in terms of the, splitting up, I don't see that being a whole lot different or any different than two people going on the radio and speaking for the committee and representing the committee. And what we're doing here is we're asking to bring factually, just present, and basically it's listening, it's not even speaking for
If that
for
was
the
the-
council. So here's the recommendations, it's pretty factual, go through them, comparable to what we did the other night, and then just listen. So in terms of just that alone, I'm very comfortable with that. Whether or not we should do it, and we have enough time to do it, I think that's still up for discussion. There was, I also think that, in the 90-day period, the clock started ticking when the first meeting in council in December, yeah. And that whole period of time, to me, was sort of a kind of a down time in terms of actually people having an opportunity to present. We didn't have any forums, and there was the city council, the second meeting where we discussed it at the council. Very busy time of the holidays, so I don't think there was a whole lot of focus on that. So there's about 30 days that might have been less productive than it could have been. And I know for some people, the meeting that we had on Monday, coming right after the holidays, was, I think, difficult. I know some people were just getting back and trying to get focused and things like that. So I'm not saying the turnout would have been substantially more, but I'm not taking that as necessarily a statement that everybody has had their say. So those are two of the concerns that I still have, and I still think there's a lot of merit to Alex argument.
I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the, piggybacking on what Jesus suggested, there are a lot of other lists we could also do that similar thing with, because all the ward associations have mail, like Ward 3 has a
yeah,
mail
we
list.
can get them out to Ward 3, we got a big list, sir.
I'm sure that the planning department would let us send something out on the planning department's list. And so there's a lot of different lists we could try to do stuff by email to try to get people. But, if we wanted to try to do another meeting like at JFK, like a Florence-based meeting, just give it one more shot to see if we can get people to come out. If we did something in mid-February or something like that, I suppose we could give it a try and see. I think I'd prefer that to to trying to just go all over the place. But again, that doesn't mean that individual members can't go to a meeting and say, hey, look at this report, please check it out, please give us feedback, or I don't think there's any problem. We should all be, I suppose, promoting it that way. But so I don't know. I guess if people want to try to do another event, we can try. But I do think that there are other ways we can try to reach out to people if we're really trying to target some of these key constituencies. I mean, the chamber has a listserv. There are lots of, I assume Florence Civic and Business has a listserv.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of listservs we could try to tap into.
Jesus?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple things I wanted to say. Along the ideas of the Paradise City Forum suggestion, the Valley Advocate, it's printed, weekly, so the same thing is gonna be, in there for, 6-7 days. It'd probably be a good idea to try to contact them and see if they
called
would...
Mark Rossler from the Valley Advocate the week before the thing. I told him both about the thing on Monday night. In this meeting, he said he'd be to both. Not here.
Can you, well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you could ask him if he'd be willing to print the recommendations with an article.
Sure. We could certainly try to do it. We try to get, we got press coverage from both papers after we put in the draft recommendations.
Right, but there's a difference between coverage and like press coverage and just getting contact with people and actually kind of having a conversation.
Well, all I'm saying is that we really did reach out to all the media with modest success.
I'm not saying you didn't. It's just this is a different means of reaching out. This is a different way of doing it. Is that you're actually putting the 10 recommendations out there and you're asking for comment on the recommendations rather than asking for general attention to the meetings or to the committee. You're asking them to, if they'd be willing to print it and do an article and maybe even an interview with one of the members.
Can I say something? Is it right? Just
Yeah.
on that topic and then yield it back to you. How about, we had talked about doing an executive summary report and then we decided not to because it was short enough and etc. But now I'm thinking maybe we could write, as if it were an executive summary, an op-ed piece for the Gazette, which would capture all of this. What we did succinctly, the recommendations, and the deadline for final input before we issue our final report to the committee. And I think that would get to a lot of places. We could also post that whatever that is, that executive summary, that op-ed, that could be what we post. And in that have the deadline for people to get back to us. In addition to, I would say one more forum, no more than that. That's how I feel about it right now.
But my feeling after listening, as long as there's the potential for reaching out to the public, I'm a little bit conflicted because obviously best practice is to do that. But at some point, we have to say, do we have enough? And I think we need to look at our product, and our product is a set of recommendations on how the city can address the concerns that have been voiced to us. What needs to be done? Are more concerns? And I think the last meeting I indicated that I saw this more as a philosophy than a set of specific rules for each situation. And I think that the message that our report conveys to whomever is the fact that we should always seek to have optimum public participation. That's a long round way of saying I don't know what more would be accomplished by having another forum. It would seem to me that people who are interested in this process, if they had something that was not already addressed, they would certainly make that made known to us. I do like the idea of going on to Paradise City Forum. I also like Wendy's idea about the op-ed piece for the Gazette, if they would allow us to do it.
They would love for us to do it.
Pardon?
They would love for us to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be good, and if people thereafter have, we sense there's a need or a desire or a want for an additional forum, be happy to hold it.
And my only thought, I think the op-ed piece is a great idea. I don't think we should try to do it in 2 weeks. We try to do it about the time we give our report to the city council, give our final report. If we want to try to get input, otherwise, we can try to do that. But if we're going to have an op-ed piece about our recommendations, we're only going to have one shot at that. And I think it should be close to the time we make the actual recommendation.
I see what you're saying. I would disagree, though, on this grounds, that I think that after the op-ed piece, if people have had the opportunity to read it and want to give additional input, we should allow sufficient time to incorporate that
So
in our
every time
report.
you'd rather do that than have one at the time. I think we only have one shot.
Well, what I'm saying is really there's no urgent request from the public for an additional form.
Right.
And so why create a need that might not be there? But after people have had the opportunity to carefully review our recommendations through the Paradise City Forum, or as Wendy suggested, through an op-ed piece, then people might want to react to that. And all I'm saying is that rather than doing it simultaneously with submitting our report, maybe allow a week or two before that.
Well, but that little, that won't give us much time. If we're gonna try to get responses from the public through an op-ed piece, we gotta do that in the next 2 weeks, it seems to me.
2 or 3 weeks, right?
That can be done I think it can be done very quickly.
Ken?
Alex had his hand up earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex.
And I interrupted him.
Oh,
Of course.
Do you want to go back to Jesus? Did you get your finished thought? I kind of like to.
Yeah, I'll go really quickly and just leave it wherever it is. As far as the Valley Advocate thing, I think it's trying to do the, outreach to them again and asking them to do that, I think would be a good idea, not only because it's another media source, but it's also a media source where articles have been printed about city politics. So you're reaching out to like a logical audience. Going back to the idea of specific recommendations versus the recommendations that you have, I think most of the recommendations that you have are of where there needs to be improvement, but and I don't know if this is being expected of the committee or if this is something that people have to take up. The actual means by which that's going to happen might not be really clear. Since it's going back to the 10th recommendation, the idea of the city charter change, and that part of that was spurred by the idea of the mayor chairing the city council meetings. One of the things that you might be able to include as part of that recommendation is something like the idea of asking if one or more of the city council meetings could be run with an absentee mayor. We know that Jim Dostal does it in the absence of the mayor, and it's one way of kind of gauging whether that's something that you can do without throwing everything into chaos, because we kind of know that you can't really have the same level of public interaction in the meeting of best practices as you could in the city council. We know we're not going to make the city council adopt consensus as a way of voting. Those things probably would likely throw the city council into chaos, but this is something where you can realistically, that the alternative doesn't throw everything into chaos. It's reasonable to do, and it's a way of kind of keeping that part of that conversation alive.
The only problem is, Jesus, that our recommendation was not that the city charter be amended to preclude the mayor from presiding at the city council. It was that a review of the city charter be made to determine if that's the right thing to do. I don't think we've concluded that it is.
Right.
But we've said that there's enough public comment to suggest that a significant number of people in the city would like such a review to take place. So when we get into implementation,
One of our successors get into implementation.
yeah, I mean, we've also recommended that our committee continue, but I don't think we ever really set out to say this is how to implement it. I don't think that was.
I agree.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you
That's
do.
not what I'm hearing. Hearing you keeping the conversation alive, that it's an interest. It's the same thing as John Sitton brought up, the feedback on the difference between policy and implementing that policy. That the mayor and the planning department and the economic development set up procedures that feed. It's just an interesting area. It's interesting whether in fact the illusion of public participation in something like
Yeah, that's-
the future of Northampton, the sustainable Northampton, is in fact really a product of the city, or sort of a directed facade that feeds, directed by hired, city puts resources in, hires professionals that come in. I don't want to get into the discussion either. There are lots of interesting discussions, and I think that giving people an opportunity to read the specifics, an op-ed piece, this is the size of an op-ed piece. So the op-ed piece can't have all of these points. That's why I think it's important now to get this document out. This is what I'd like to get out, so that people can actually sit down, look at the various points, begin to, have that.
So are we all in
spark
agreement, we'd like to
conversation.
get David's one-page summary out to every listserv we can
I
find?
haven't seen
It's just the recommendations that can be scrunched onto one page. That's all it is.
Good point. It's to see it physically, it's nice to have. It's something you could
You need a
leave
frame.
around the city. We could actually put $100 worth of reproduction time and leave these around the city. I guess I'm desperate at this point. I really still think that we can get a conversation going.
I don't know.
think that we've had one from time to time, and can still do that. So that's I kind of agree with Bob about the op-ed. I think that that's kind of the second topic that we should be talking about at some point, maybe not at this meeting, is how are we going to try and recommend the next step, how the city ought to go about implementing best practices.
And that's actually the question that I have, that I think that really determines everything, is how do you see, I agree with the op-ed piece going out to inform people who didn't see already, to offer their comments on general recommendations, but where do take an example. I think it's pretty clear that people want to have an opportunity for public comment to be more interactive, say at city council meetings. That would be one thing. But where do you see someone sitting down and crafting a way to do that, and then having the public be able to participate and say that, yes, I approve that, or no, I don't. I thought that was really the whole idea of the Best Practices Committee, is that that's what would happen. And then on all of your recommendations, somebody, before it goes to city, I don't think city council is going to do it, otherwise they would have done it rather than creating this committee to do it. So somebody has to do it, and where do you see that happening? Because that's when you're going to get the people from the May 13th forum to come back to those meetings to participate.
I want to do a little bit of a time check. I think we have probably an hour left. I think we're halfway through, or almost.
Right.
I've heard at least 4 specific discussions, which I would like to kind of tease out and then focus on and then vote them up or down. One of them is Jesus's idea of utilizing the Paradise City Forum and other venues.
Yep.
So that's one particular one. And I think if we agree to that, then
Yeah.
we should
Yeah,
discuss
we
it,
can do
vote
that,
on it.
that's right.
Well, I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
Put 'em all
And then we need someone to implement it. Then there is the one of having another forum, perhaps at the Florence Civic Center at, sometime later this month or in February. Then there was the op-ed idea. I think,
Which is part of a general newspaper outreach, it seems to
right,
me.
and that's a specific piece, and I think we could, talk, at least finalize whether or not we want it as an op-ed on the draft proposal or on the final proposal. I mean,
right.
we haven't decided that. And then there's the concerns around making some specific recommendations on some of these. And, because that brings up a concern. There's three of them that seem to me, if we wanted to, we could really focus in and bring back a draft for the city council to consider. And I'm looking at, for example, 7, 8, and 9. You know, the vision, mission statement, a proposal for a standing committee, and proposal for some rules change. I mean, the ordinance committee could even put that on the agenda of our meeting next month and saying we're looking at the rules from this lens and have a forum on that. So those are three possibilities. And for those that we don't do, I'm beginning to think that maybe we need to recommend a logical point person to continue these once this committee ends. Because some of them are written almost in the passive voice. The city should assume. Well, the city isn't going to assume who in the city is going. A couple of them are specific. One says the mayor and finance committee and finance director, that's number 3. But many of them are very
There's a new
vague.
employee in the city clerk's office that's just sitting around in a chair, hasn't
Yeah.
much to do, and
Real quiet.
losing weight.
Real quiet.
Yeah. The skeleton
No,
crew?
that's who I'm afraid is gonna end up being designated.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, a little levity's
Well-
fine.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
I'm the guy who always refers back to the resolution because that's sort of like how this all happened. And so here's what the resolution says. The committee shall present its final recommendations to the Northampton City Council no later than March 5th. Upon receipt of the final recommendations, and I won't read out the ad hoc, blah, 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 the Northampton City Council will refer to its various committees of jurisdiction the responsibility for reviewing said recommendations and drafting appropriate orders, ordinances, and resolutions for the city of Northampton. So I mean, it's implied in here that the council will receive them, will then go through them, and ones that relate to the rules will get referred to the rules committee. And you're smiling at me, but I know that, but I mean, that's what
I'm not-
that's what I'll press for as a member of the
I
council.
think President
Yeah.
Dahl
And I think
seemed
that's
very
what- and
interested,
that's what I
very
think-
engaged.
and
He
I think
enjoyed
he
meeting
has
with
a
us.
rein-
I
and I also-
trust that
right.
he will do this.
I also think one of the things at the beginning of this process, when we talked about, okay, approving the resolution, we had our own little public forum. It was one of those workshop style meetings where the council meets, but it's in an informal setting. We don't take votes. It's interactive. I could almost see us doing another one of those.
A best practice is retreat.
Not a retreat, but I'm saying just a workshop outside of the normal meeting to talk about these things and plan a strategy for how we would do it. I mean, in fact, I've mentioned that. I mean, that's what I propose we approach it, because that's how we did it at the front end when we thought, okay, let's figure out how many people we should have on it. And
Is
how
that a
many,
public meeting?
It was, yeah. It's a public meeting, and we have it in our rules that we can do it. The mayor's not there. It's strictly the council working on some matter that it wants to work on, but there's no votes, there's no orders, there's no motions. We're just having a conversation and like sort of having a think tank kind of a thing. We did it with the CPA. You know, when the CPA passed, we had this meeting to figure out, okay, now what are we going to do?
So this is kind of a transition implementation discussion, working meeting, is that kind of what it would be?
It is, but again, I'm speaking for I'm saying that's what I would prefer. That doesn't mean all other 9 members would want to do it. But you know, if the council president wanted to call such a meeting, then you know, members could choose or not choose to show up. But
I'm sorry. Michael, what I want to do is keep it, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt your
comment. I
train
mean,
of
since you
thought.
just read the resolution, I think you kind of made it clear that it says there that it's the city council's responsibility to designate who's going to be responsible for which recommendations. So you're saying that the committee shouldn't make any specific recommendations on who should take those?
I wasn't
Which,
saying.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I wasn't saying. I mean, I don't think. I mean, if this committee wanted to draft a draft,
Proposed new charter.
a proposed new, no, not a proposed new charter, but a draft resolution for the vision statement or something, we could certainly do that. But I still think our job was to give them recommendations, and they're supposed to take them. And it's with the understanding that they're the elected body that has the say about what, implementing them. So, that doesn't mean we can't recommend something, but I don't know.
Well, and I don't think there's anything in our charge that precludes us from making more specific recommendations, because they're only that, they're recommendations. My concern is, and we saw it in the beginning of this committee, I've seen it in other committees, is that sometimes when a body starts on something new, there's a kind of a startup time and not a whole lot gets done. There's a lot of our colleagues who will be new to this and looking at it from a different perspective, and so before we get to the specific part of it, it may take a while on. So if there were some of these areas where we could do some of the heavy lifting and make some recommendations, if we can get that far, I think that may very well be helpful. But it still would be recommendations, very much as your recommendation was the committee of a whole. That's a recommendation. So those are things that are up to the council. My concern is, again, that when they get this recommendation, there'll be a couple of months, and then it's summer, and then it's a couple of months, and then it's into the fall, and then
It's an
before you
election
know
year.
before you know it, the clock is running out on the council year. So, and then you get a new council in there, perhaps. Well, you'll definitely get a new council, perhaps with some new faces. And so then there's a whole startup on that with people getting, learning the ropes, so to speak. So that's what I'm a little bit concerned with, that the clock could quickly be playing out on us. So I think it's to our advantage, as much work as we can do on specifics, and again, the recommendations, the better off we're going to be.
With an eye for the clock here, why don't we see, is there a consensus on publishing in the Paradise City Forum as a
Widespread electronic distribution, including the Paradise City Forum,
Okay.
the city listserv,
So why
neighbor
widespread
associations.
electronic
Of the recommendations.
of the
The
recommendations? Is there consensus
Well,
on that?
my question would be, would you do a link to them, or would you try to actually send the
I
Try to
think
whole?
send them
I
the,
think that's the point I hear, is
Yeah,
to
send them the
actually
thing.
have them right there.
yeah.
Okay.
So they're
You
in
can
front of
With a
people.
short appeal.
Okay, but just the recommendations, not the report.
Right.
And then a reference to the
Yeah.
whole report.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay,
Does that include also print, that we're gonna try and get it printed in the newspapers?
well, that
Well,
was
that's,
the other thing.
that's the
That's the next
electronic
thing.
part.
Okay.
All
Number
right.
two, we're gonna reach out again.
Do you want to see if we have consensus?
Well,
on the-
okay, we have consensus on that one.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is the op-ed piece and other print media, trying to get the recommendations. Well, the op-ed piece obviously would be more than just the recommendations. Is there consensus that we'll try to draft an op-ed piece for the Gazette?
For a win.
Well, yeah,
well-
I just want to, since I brought this up, I want to respectfully disagree with the timing of it. I feel like I see it as an opportunity to put it in the recommendations, a little bit of other contextual language, and then say, this is the draft report, the final report is due then. If you have comments, get it to us by this date. And I'm already looking at dates.
Okay, okay.
And the point being, what I imagine we're going to do with comments, unless there are things that come here or we've heard elsewhere or come in through the listserv or whatever, that we attach them as additional comments, that we don't try to rewrite our document unless, there's something very strong that we want to amend, that we simply attach that as comments during the public review period to add that to the document. We just simply don't have that long of time to sit and rewrite the document, if that's what it is, unless there are things that really jump out at us that we want to amend the draft.
Question.
So that would be my argument for having
Okay.
it be not at the end, but sooner rather than later, as a publicity effort, an outreach effort. Thanks.
Question for Wendy. Would the op-ed piece include the text of all the 10 recommendations?
Well, do you think
Yeah.
it's beyond the words of the,
Yeah.
beyond the word count?
700 words, I think, is their maximum. I didn't do a count, but I bet it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should talk to them about what
Well,
would work.
may I make the,
don't know.
the suggestion that why don't we leave that to the writer to decide?
Well, it's not our decision, it's their decision, and so.
Well, I
we
mean, if whoever's gonna draft the op-ed piece, I don't wanna dictate to that person.
Well, it's gonna be one of us.
Right, I know, but let's say it's you, we're not gonna dictate to you that you must include all these
Well, I think
recommendations.
we
That's, the
should. I think
question is
that's an
not telling her what to write. What I want to do is find out whether
How big is it?
I see that as two separate questions.
I agree.
The op-ed is one thing, these are another. So that's
Yeah.
why I was thinking
Yeah.
that,
And if we want to get one thing published, it's those,
Yes.
not the op-ed.
yes, will you publish these?
Well, I see the op-ed being this. We're calling it an op-ed because we can't get them to come to a meeting. We can't get them to even announce
Right.
we're meeting. So we take the bull by the horns. I think we sent out press releases, maybe they get reduced, and we simply write our op-ed. And our op-ed contains your good question because it does go over the word limit. So how do we get the recommendations in with a little contextual language and a point about get us your feedback before
Yes.
this date? Can we do that? Can we somehow make it all fit?
So let's try. I would definitely agree with that. That sounds like a really good idea.
Right, and that's fine, but you know, that's different than what was originally proposed.
Right.
Okay.
By who?
Well, by you, I mean, it was supposed to be a
She talked about an
discussion.
op-ed piece first.
Right, you talked about an op-ed piece where there'd be some explanation of our process.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean by contextualize it. It would be
Contextualize.
minimized because the recommendations are
All right.
primarily what we want to
Which
get in.
doesn't,
So, I'm
which
sorry.
doesn't preclude trying again at the final time to do the reasons that the city ought to get busy and working
Right.
on this.
So the 10 recommendations are what's most important in the next 2 weeks. Is that
Right.
right?
Yes.
And if we can get a couple of paragraphs to say, tell us what you think, that's great. But that's different than an op-ed piece, I think. So if we can get the 10 recommendations in the next 2 weeks with 2 or 3 paragraphs, then we can also prepare an op-ed piece for early March.
And it'd be nice to get it in the op-ed place.
I understand.
So, if you're hoping for 2 op-ed placements,
Yes, one of which is the recommendations,
and then another one,
is the op-ed piece.
Okay.
You-
Is that consistent
I
with what
see
you're
it as
saying?
one op-ed and trying to make it work for everything.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
as far as the term.
Because I don't know if they're gonna give us 2.
Well-
Are you talking about a story, which we've never been, or we've hardly been successful in getting, and on top of an op-ed?
I'm talking about I'm talking about the recommendations in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
An op-ed in early March.
You know,
But both of them
Frank-
as op-eds, both in
I
that
don't
format?
care how they put the recommendations in.
all right.
So Alex says it'd be nice if it was on the editorial page somewhere.
Right, and I see an op-ed piece that could address the 10 recommendations without going through
Without
each
each bullet point.
specific
Yeah, we want all the bullet points.
recommendation,
Right.
and therefore you could contextualize it and explain.
Yeah, I'm with Alex. I think
All right,
we do
give it a
need
shot.
to-
I think you really want
The meat.
as much detail. The meat is not the general way. You want the bullet points. And it would be nice if we really were.
If they would do
was-
the story.
Is to get an editorial that says,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If
Yeah.
they would refer to them in
Yes.
the paper and encourage people to go.
even if they're not on the editorial page, but yes, give us an editorial saying, this is really, we should think about this.
I can try to format it in a, like an ad, like a 2-column format, like a news, so send it to them in a really easy format to like put in the paper. Let's see. I
Maybe
could
we
try to
should.
do it like that.
Get
I
it
could,
in.
I could PDF it in like a 2-column newsprint style format and see.
All right.
That's a good to you, Wendy?
What now exactly? What David just said?
Yeah.
Uh,
That we try to get them
the
to
word
put the
count is the
recommendations
word
first.
count. I mean, we
Well-
have to talk with them about that.
You know, what David recommended is not an op-ed piece, right?
But it's on,
I-
gonna be on the same
Right,
page.
I'm
but
talking-
let's use the term,
Right,
the term
right.
op-ed. I'm all in favor of David's suggestion that we try to publish, get this as widely published as we can, be it in the Advocate, the Daily Gazette.
Right.
Wherever, that's fine, I have no problem with that. But I see an op-ed piece as being something different.
I'm,
Yeah.
But I'm all in favor of what David recommended of publishing it.
I say that, although I'm not the publisher.
No, I mean,
can't
but
tell them
at
what to
least
do.
presenting
Right,
them with
yeah,
something that they
present.
can, just easily reproduce for the paper. Yes,
Well, I agree, I hear two separate things. One is the op-ed, and I think by the nature of the op-ed, we're gonna be limited to the 10 major recommendations.
Right.
And then, so I think we should do that, and then in addition, we should make the, follow the suggestion David just made about getting the entire proposal recommendations also printed.
Okay,
Whether or
so,
not it's done at the same time, I don't care.
So-
Both of those, I think, would be legitimate efforts, the op-ed and the full text.
so do we have consensus on doing
No,
both?
we don't.
No.
Alex is.
Yeah.
I think that,
We consensus on doing both, we don't get to the when.
No,
when is really important, because I think that Bob's right, we all have that many bites here at the paper. And if we're gonna ask them for a favor, gonna, make our case, that they get all of these points, and possibly an editorial directing that. That's what we're looking for in the next couple of weeks, to get all of this stuff in the paper.
To get the list with the bullet points in the paper.
Yes, and the op-ed piece summarizing and recommending and the rest, I don't think that, I can't believe they're gonna do both. They might, but, and I'm more interested, I'm personally more interested in seeing this than that.
Yeah, you know me, I always come up with, I think it's one thing to publicize what we published. And I'm all in favor of doing that. To then act as advocates for our position publicly, I think goes beyond our brief. Our our responsibility is to present the city council with our recommendations. And that would suggest to me then that we are not advocates, that what we've done is prepared our recommendations which we're submitting to the city council. And publicizing them widely and broadly, that's one thing. But then to act as advocates for it, I think is beyond the pale.
Well, I don't think that's the case. I mean, who's gonna speak for us if not us?
Well, we don't, exactly, I mean, we make the recommendation to the city council. We, we make the recommendation to the city council, the public knows what our recommendations are. If the public wants these implemented, then they act as advocates. City councilors could, you as a city councilor could make a motion to the city council and try to make sure that they get it passed. We are only advisory. We are not advocates.
Jim, and what has been said that you feel like we've crossed the line? What in
Well,
terms
the
of
point
advocacy?
that we would try to sell this in printed form, rather than educate, we become advocates.
No, I wasn't.
I think it was
I didn't mean
education.
that.
Okay, well, if you didn't mean it, then my words were wasted. But that's what I heard,
No, that's definitely not what I'm saying.
yeah.
And I don't think that's what David's was saying.
No, I didn't, I agree. David just said publish the stuff, which I agree with.
Can I go back to what my original point was in suggesting an op-ed? It was our executive summary that we didn't write. That's kind of what I see it as. And the point being, if we don't take control of the information that gets in the paper, there won't be any information in the paper, and that was the point. And it was bouncing off of what Jesus said about using the forums, and here's another opportunity. So
Right.
that's all.
No, I have no problem whatsoever objectively reporting what we've recommended. That's fine.
And advocating for it.
Well,
See,
that's
that-
where
that
we
might- I don't have
differ.
any problem doing that.
I do.
I'm not saying I liked every bullet point.
Right.
I'm saying we worked hard to come up with this smorgasbord of kinds of things the city should consider. And I hope they do, and the city in its wisdom will pick the ripest of the fruit.
Wow. And I would urge you that as a city councilor, once the report has been placed, that you move to have it passed and adopted by the city
Yeah,
council.
yeah.
But I think as a committee that we should not be, I
We
mean,
just give it to them and
obviously,
say, okay, do what you want.
yeah,
I don't think that. I think that we are all believe in what we've come up with here.
absolutely. And I'm, like Wendy said, I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. But why don't,
Okay.
let's move on, because
So, do we,
we agreed.
we're gonna, what I have in the minutes is David's gonna format this stuff, and he and I will talk to the advocate and the Gazette about getting the recommendations printed in the paper.
All right.
And then
as
Wendy,
prominently as possible.
and then Wendy will draft an executive summary, which can be used as the basis for
I
a
love the
future
way you're
op-ed.
creating this, you know.
And bring and get that to us. So that'd be something that we hope would happen just before we issue our final recommendation.
And that is only
Okay.
gonna have the 10, it's not gonna have the meat, it's not gonna
That's
happen,
right,
because
right.
you're
And-
hoping,
and it
but we
doesn't
need
have
to
to have
know
all
whether
10.
the Gazette is
Yeah.
gonna,
And what Wendy is gonna do, let's refer to that as the op-ed, okay?
yeah, it's our
All right.
printed
And
executive
does
summary.
everybody agree, we have a consensus on the op-ed?
Well, so in
It's
terms
really gonna
of
be-
timing,
Pulled from what we've done, nothing added.
I just want to clarify the timing. In terms of the timing, if the entire proposal gets published, that would be sooner.
As soon as we
Oh,
can.
yeah.
And then the last piece that I heard when Bob was reviewing it was that the op-ed or the executive summary would be at the end of
Yeah.
the process.
Yeah. We could
And
all,
so if we haven't talked about having another meeting, but if we had another meeting, it would be somewhere in between those two.
that's right.
So,
Another meeting or another forum?
for a
Okay.
public meeting, public forum. So, part of any publishing of the entire document then should include a date, if you have another forum,
Just thinking that.
is to, and then the executive summary will then be very much of the final
Yeah,
proposals.
that's right,
At the
that's
end
right.
of the process. Just to clarify.
And but I'm still not, where are we on this other public forum?
Well, let's
As I
reach
understand it,
consensus on this and then move on to the
Okay.
next.
Well, can I ask a question? What if the Gazette says, are you imagining that they're gonna print at no cost to us, our report? Is that kind of what
Not the
you're gonna
report,
ask
but
them
the
to do?
recommendations.
The recommendations?
Yeah.
And as a kind of a free ad or make
No,
a
just
news
as part of the-
story?
Not
As a news,
that.
as a news story.
It is
Well, no,
news.
they could print it in the editorial or the in our opinion section.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So that's an op-ed too.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, right, yeah.
Yeah.
but
If
it's like,
this,
almost like publishing verbatim the speech of
That's
of a
right.
prominent person.
Then it's not an op-ed because
Right.
it's too big
Yeah.
for that. So, well, I'll let you guys figure that
It would be like
out.
one of those box, like a box kind of a thing. I would assume.
More letters from readers.
Right.
But it's got everything.
Yeah.
A long letter.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, that's
I'll let you
the
worry
goal.
about
Yeah.
that.
That's the goal.
All right, so now
How
let's make
small can you
absolutely
print?
clear.
Legal ad.
We've already reached consensus on parity
We
city
could-
form. Is there consensus on seeking to have the whole document published?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And is there consensus on the op-ed piece, i.e. executive summary?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Do we want to, there are two other things we could think about here. Do we want to try to talk to the editorial board of the Gazette? I think we should. So we have to figure out, and we don't have to do that until a couple of weeks before the recommendations. We have a month before we have to think about doing that, but that something would be worth doing, I think, seems to me.
Yep.
And I don't think that the city council expects us to be any more specific in our recommendations. I do think it might be helpful if we could put some dollar signs for something. I realize that's gonna be a very difficult thing to do. But we're thinking about, that's one thing we could do in lieu of another public forum.
Jesus?
Yeah, I think that's kind of reasonable, is looking at maybe not how much specific recommendations might cost for the ones that do have costs, but also maybe how much time and effort, some of the specific ones, like what's the requirements for actually implementing it, rather than saying this is how you implement it. And just a kind of random comment along those lines is that idea that someone mentioned before, that some of these recommendations do have a cost, and there were citizens that say we can't support, or there were people that were saying we don't want to support a recommendation that has a cost given the economy and things like that, and that you might want to consider highlighting one of those cost recommendations and maybe explaining the cost effectiveness of that particular recommendation. Like, let's say independent legal counsel for the city council, or just legal counsel in general. Are you possibly saving money by having this information beforehand, rather than getting sued and then having to pay for the suit. So I guess it's looking at how much, if the recommendation has a cost, explaining the externalized cost of not having the recommendation, that might be worthwhile.
I think we have a variety of opinion on that, and that would be hard to reach consensus on
You know,
that.
I recently had opportunity or requirement to try to compute accurately monthly overhead. And just for a very small organization, it is much more complex than I ever anticipated. I don't think that we have the time or the resources to do an intelligent analysis of cost factors. And I
Or
remind
even an
everybody.
unintelligent one.
Yeah. If I did it, it would not be too intelligent. But I also want to remind everybody of our eighth recommendation, and that is that we designate a standing committee to continue the work that we began. And I think that that's essential. I probably, of all the recommendations, that is the most important, because we worked under really unrealistic time constraints with absolutely no resources, and we did what we had to do. But to make this work, this has to be a continuing process. Let me go to Alex first.
Two things. One, I'd still like to talk about the forum. And Florence Civic seems like a really easy, it's a venue. It's a place a lot of people can walk to. And if we're doing all this publicity to get these recommendations and the bullet points out, I think that it's worth the effort to see. If nobody shows up, we have not invested much. So I'm willing to work on that and do it. With Wendy.
No, she wasn't volunteering, I believe. She was just
Yeah, I
agreeing it was a good
supporting.
idea.
You want my support or not?
But the other thing that I think
No.
that might be reasonable is to ask some similar towns what they spend. I'd be interested what Amherst spends on its website.
Oh,
Just to,
they have a huge department, and it's very.
well, but that's an interesting thing. They think that it's worthwhile to spend this amount of money. They and have just the same type.
No, they get tons of local aid. They're lucky, and their taxes are. I'm sorry, I'm going up on
Yeah,
your thing.
their taxes are.
Their taxes are
Amazing.
out of this world.
Yeah.
Well, but let's look at other. We have. It might be worth. I mean, we've got a committee. We've got 7 people. We've got 7 people. We've got till March, early March. It might be worthwhile to call some similar sized towns and ask them what they spent for specific. The website is the thing that comes most to mind, but legal stuff, what you spend on your what your city council has to spend, some dollar signs.
David? I'm sorry, you were done? Alex?
Yeah, I'm done.
I mean, that's certainly something we could try to do as a research tool to give to the city council, but I also see, when I look back at this, what we read from the resolution, I mean, one of the city council's committees is the finance committee, and I could certainly see if there are recommendations that have an obvious cost associated with them, then those need to be referred to the finance committee, and the finance committee could report back to the full council, we've costed these out. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, if you're gonna hire an employee at a whatever level, G4, I don't know what system they use, but whatever the step level of somebody of whatever category we're proposing, it'd be pretty easy for the finance committee to come back and say, well, with salary and benefits and et cetera, this is what it would cost. So I mean, I see that as part of it as something that would be part of that whole thing where the council takes it, refers it to committees, and things that have a price tag, that would be the finance committee's role. So,
Yeah.
and there you've got the finance director, you've got the mayor, you've got, but that doesn't mean if we can do more research about the cost of websites and things like that we can't do that as well. But I don't think, I see that there is a place where that could happen.
I'm trying to get everybody a chance, so Michael?
Yeah, I think, I agree with David on that point. I think it's much more fitting for this city council, whether it's through the finance committee or some other forum within the council, to analyze it in terms of cost factor and implementation. I still think it makes much more sense for us to kind of tease out some of our recommendations to give them some ideas of how this would be implemented. I think that will come a lot easier to us than trying to do a cost analysis of this. So if we are to expend any more time on the details of this, I think we'll get a lot more done, be a lot more effective trying to explain and tease out some of our ideas rather than the cost analysis. And I think an excellent place to start would be the recommendation for an ongoing committee, because we have left that kind of vague. We've left that with two different models out there. And I think any group approaching that from the outside looking at it might be rather confusing about just where to go with that. So I think that would be much more a good investment.
Would you be willing to draft something for us to look at? So, I mean, how in our short amount of time can we go there with this in a more detailed way? That's the
Well,
only thing I can think.
if we want to go into that, I don't know what I don't know what the consensus is, if they even want us, the
Right.
consensus is to go.
And the reason I mentioned the cost is because Wayne said it was his impression, in his committee, we were gonna put price tags on this stuff, and I don't know why he thought that, but it seemed to me a possible thing we could do. I agree that it's probably not something we should try to do, though.
Yeah, and can I just say something about that? I agree. And I felt there were times during the course of our deliberations and my own thinking, I said, wait, this is sort of crossing the line between sort of practices about decision-making and a management study. And we have to sort of remember what our task is here. And my thinking is, relative to the cost, and I did see the email from Rose Schmidt, who brought that issue up, that perhaps when I draft an op-ed or the executive summary, whatever we want to call it, I can allude to that issue and we'll discuss it. That we know that there are some costs with these or whatever, but I can try to take a stab at that issue as a concern, not something we're oblivious to, whatever, and then we can discuss it. So we don't put a cost, but we acknowledge that there are costs and
Yeah.
cost benefit and
Right.
the issue of
I mean,
really
Wayne
looking
did
at this.
talk a lot during our InReach interview about just the costs of outreach and the costs. I mean, he did talk a lot about costs
Right.
and talked about sustainable Northampton and some of the costs associated with that. And so, but I don't think we said that we were gonna start costing stuff out because
Right.
but we certainly took that as feedback. But I think it's reflected in the InReach stuff that resources are a big issue. Among departments, the city clerk said stuff about that, and other people said stuff about having the resources to do some of the things that they agree should be done. So,
But one thing our recommendations don't do on the whole is they don't address the fact that some of them are gonna be relatively expensive, I don't think. We all know that, but I don't think we called
So
out
I can
in
put
our
that in an-
report
in the-
that that's,
Ken,
And I think, just on that subject, I think, when you present the idea to legal counsel, to the council that they should have their own legal counsel, I think, the sort of first reaction would be, well, that's gonna be too expensive. But I think, we should, I would assume, or I don't know why, what our legal costs are by not having legal counsel for city council are, but it certainly has to be compared to that, And, because we certainly had some suits over the last few years. But, I just think the council has to be aware that there are costs both ways, and having your own legal counsel is probably the cheaper way to go.
we've got about 20 minutes to go, and there's still some items that have already been proposed, and I just wonder if we can
Okay.
see if we've reached consensus on that. The other one is, does everybody we should be at least thinking in terms preliminarily of another forum to be held primarily in Florence? Is there consensus on that?
Can we pick a date?
I'd love to set a date because
Yeah.
Yes.
and that we can't do because we don't know when the Florence City
Right.
Association will be available.
But at least we're working towards that.
But if like in the next day or
Look,
two,
what-
Right.
Tomorrow,
We-
I'll go there.
Okay.
Okay,
Can
Is
we,
that back-
Why don't we
and Alex will do it.
identify some possible dates?
yeah,
Would
'cause
that
if that
make
can be
sense?
included If we
Right.
can get something
Yeah.
printed.
It
then-
needs to be,
Yeah.
otherwise it doesn't.
How about the first week of February? That's,
Third through the 9th, third through the 8th.
third, fourth, fifth.
I'm sorry.
City council meeting on the
Fifth, right.
fifth.
The third or the fourth, the third? I
So
can't do the
how about the
fourth.
second?
I'm not even here that week.
Yeah, the
No, the
third,
third doesn't work for me.
Tuesdays I'm not available.
All right,
Well, we may not get the entire committee, but we should get the
Okay.
majority.
But,
How about, yeah, the first week of February or,
the
Only
last,
Wednesday night, Tuesday or Wednesday works for, Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday works for me.
Well, Monday can't, because you have ordinance.
Is it,
ordinance,
On the
no,
ninth.
it's not till the ninth.
it's not on the
Oh, I
ninth.
thought you meant Monday of the following, I thought we were in the following.
No,
week. I'm
the
sorry.
first week of February.
February? So
I'm
that'd
not
be
here
the
that week.
10th.
I don't know.
The week of the third?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a training.
I
on
would
that.
recommend looking at the week of the ninth.
Okay.
The week of the ninth.
That's
Okay.
wide open.
Is it wide open? You got,
Tuesday, Wednesday,
I think
Thursday for me,
we
you're
got-
fine.
Ordinance on the ninth, but other than that, it's wide
So-
open.
I think
I
Lincoln's
think-
birthday would be a good day to do it.
What day?
I'm just, Lincoln's birthday
Oh,
is
I
the
see.
Showing her age. Remember when they used to have separate holidays for Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday? I do.
Does the city observe?
No, actually, I don't.
You observe Lincoln's birthday?
No, just President's
No,
Day.
it's President's Day on the
President's Day
following
on
Monday.
Monday.
so we're gonna
That's,
try the
that's
10th, 11th,
vacation
and
week,
12th?
though, so
Yeah,
be careful.
12th is best for me of those options.
I don't care.
Or
Thursday,
the 11th or
12th.
12th, 11th or 12th.
I think we
Is
want to
it-
make sure is that there's not like a big planning board meeting or something
Yeah.
that night,
Right.
because there's a few
Is
big
the-
issues brewing right now.
is the 10th
planning board,
possible?
So,
Okay for me.
I can't be there the 11th, and I would like to be there, so.
Okay, I won't be there on the 10th, but that's fine. You'll never get a day
10th.
where everybody's available.
10th, 11th, or 12th, whatever works for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And doesn't have a conflict with some other major city event.
which I don't know. There may not even be a planning
Right.
board meeting that
Right.
night. I just know it's an off night
Right.
of our
Off
meeting.
Thursday,
so,
right.
Okay.
so like
Who
tonight,
has all of those dates?
Should be on the.
they're on the calendar.
Calendar on the
actually.
website?
I do get
Could you
them.
check? Would
Sure.
you check?
Yeah, I'll see what
I think
they
it, should we see what's,
And I'll
even
go-
if the planning board's meeting, depending on what their agenda is, I still think we could have our meeting that night. I'd rather have most of us come than worry about whether it conflicts with the planning board
Yeah.
meeting.
Now, the only thing about that, it's pretty late, so if it's on that week, then we will have 3 weeks with the meet one time after that
Right.
to get all our ducks in a row.
2
and-
weeks, basically.
Yeah,
We'll have really just 2 weeks because that Friday the 27th is our drop dead date.
I know we've been through this before too, but just because of time constraints, could we be, composing at home and sharing drafts with each other? Or does that have to be done at a public meeting?
Of what, drafts of what?
Of the, final recommendations or any adjustments we're making to our report?
We can't certainly deliberate about them, but you could certainly send something
So-
for
or you
people to
couldn't
review, to
comment.
come to a meeting. I
Right,
just think
okay.
you can't comment,
All right.
because then we're having a meeting.
Are we gonna set another date for our next,
Yeah.
we're gonna have another
Yeah.
meeting?
Well, there's one more thing too that we've got, there's the motion or recommendation that we try, rather than to cost things out, that we think in terms of making specific recommendations regarding implementation. At least explore that.
You mean what Michael has been talking about?
Right. Is there consensus on that?
I think it's gonna be hard for us to get much more specific, but if we can, that would be good. So I'd be in favor of that and opposed to price.
To the extent possible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if someone
Yeah.
will carry them.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Michael can do that.
so. Is
I
it,
just wanted to add a comment about that. You guys seem to have identified creating a permanent committee as one thing that most people agree on, and maybe even other people agree on, and maybe that's something that you could advocate for. Not just make as a recommendation, but highlight it and advocate for it and draft something.
Yeah, I think
That
simply
makes
by
sense.
saying
That makes sense
the
to
ball
start.
is
Yeah.
carried forward.
right,
So
Could I ask for one more date before we set the meeting date?
sure.
Can we establish a date that's sort of like the last date for people to send us comments? Would it be the 20th? Which
Of
would be like
February?
a week before, because we have to get this to the city council by
Alright.
noon
Well,
on the 27th.
Well, then can I raise my question, which is, what are we gonna do with these comments? Are we going to condense them and attach them as all the comments we heard and just leave it at that?
There are some things, to me, some that we could easily and appropriately incorporate into our draft
But
recommendation.
we're gonna have to meet and discuss that and
Right.
to make that decision,
Right.
so.
that's what I think we should do. The ones that we can incorporate, I think we should. Otherwise, we can just say, we got these comments. I think but the reason you have a draft is people say, oh, here's an idea.
Right. So then we have to figure out the timing to be able to
Right.
do that. I don't
Right.
disagree, I'm just
Okay.
saying, keep
Yeah.
that in mind.
So we should do that sometime the week of the 23rd?
Well, to respond to David's question about a deadline, if we are having a forum the week of the 9th, so there will be presumably some suggestions then. And the piece that you're gonna be drafting that will run in the paper, hopefully will be running between now and then sometime. Well, my suggestion would be Friday the 13th to be the cutoff.
Okay.
Because
As
it'll
long
be
as
after
it's
the
Friday.
forum and just boom, and then
Yep.
that gives us a little bit more time to deal with it.
And then we meet the following week,
And then we meet the following week.
That'd be
put,
great.
to put it all
Definitely
together.
don't want to do what we did last time, which is meet like the day before. and
No,
then
that's what
Right.
I'm trying to avoid. I brought your pen.
pull the all-nighter
Okay.
to-
So should we
So when do
pick
we
a
want to meet?
17th,
So
18th,
we're
or
gonna be
19th?
meeting on the 20th?
No, that's a Friday.
February?
Yeah.
No.
17th, 18th, or 19th?
We usually meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays, right?
How about the,
19th City Council.
The 18th?
I cannot. Actually, I could if we had it earlier. You know,
How
Five.
early?
but, I have to leave.
About the 16th.
That's President's holiday.
Oh, you're right, sorry.
Doesn't mean we can't meet.
And is that a problem week for you? Are you gonna be away? Or Michael, are
No,
you gonna be
it's
away? It's the
vacation week.
holiday week.
School
Well,
vacation.
17th?
If we met at 5, I could do
So
it.
Michael can't be here at 5, I think.
Yeah, and Tuesdays I'm not available.
Okay.
Okay, school vacation.
Which day, which
Like
week
you were
is the
saying.
week of the 16th?
Yes.
Is that- Yeah, I have more flexibility during the day.
Okay.
Because of school's not in session.
So we can meet on the 17th at 5?
I can't do that because I have another.
Okay.
I have
You can't
transportation
come on
parking.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesdays I can't, I'm not
Okay.
available.
So Monday or Wednesday?
Okay.
And
Well,
Monday's a holiday.
Wednesday then.
Okay.
I
So
can't,
our next meeting is,
Even in any time on Wednesday or?
no, I have orchestra rehearsal, so in the evening. And we've canceled 2 already, and we're gonna, I'm feeling, so,
But what if it was like a 4 o'clock meeting or something, or a 5 o'clock meeting?
I could do that.
When does rehearsal start?
It's, well, I have a feeling they're gonna be moving them up to 7, but they're up in Deerfield.
So if we met at 4, you'd be okay?
Sure.
Michael, does that work for you that week?
4 o'clock on the 18th?
okay.
Are we talking?
Can we
Okay.
get in here at 4?
Yes, we can. I'll make sure.
We'd probably get a-
Yeah.
Now, is that gonna be our next meeting? We're not gonna be meeting before the public forum?
I don't know.
Well, may I suggest that Alex said that he was going to explore, look into the availability of this site and stuff. Once you've done that, Alex, do you think another meeting is necessary? Why don't you just let us know and we'll set one up sometime before the forum?
I mean, does the format we followed the other night seem like an okay format to use?
Yeah,
I
I think you
I
come
think
with
so.
your
PowerPoint, yeah.
PowerPoint. We'll get us, make sure that there's a screen.
I can borrow a projector from
We
someone.
have these already printed and we'll have, and again, reach out to people, yeah.
So I don't think we have to have a meeting to talk about the
Great.
format.
Okay,
You
so
can watch the tape and maybe you'll have
Yeah,
comments
the
about
thing
it.
that feels like it's hanging for me, and we're gonna have to pull it all together on the 18th, is what we do with this additional input and what you're gonna be doing, and anything that any of us might have that we don't even know yet, that we really like to see in there, or
Right.
we, you know. so-
Now, one thing we could do with an additional meeting is review what we've already heard from Monday's meeting. We haven't touched on that at all.
Right.
So rather than let all that accumulate to one meeting.
I'm willing to, I know you counselors have to leave, but I'm willing to stay around a little longer, Alex and Jim and others, just to look at that and not make any decisions, but just talk about it a little bit. But if
Tonight?
Yeah, if we're running out of time here.
You won't have a quorum, but you could certainly do it, sort of, I
Right.
guess.
All right, we can leave that go to the very end.
Okay.
So do we want to try to schedule another meeting in January? Is that what you were saying, Michael, or no?
I'm just raising that as
Yeah.
an idea, because if we know we have feedback from Monday night, we're hoping to have feedback from the next meeting, and then we may have some proposals for further implementation around recommendation number 8. So, and we're gonna be leaving that all to one meeting.
Well, we did the marathon session before.
Yeah, that's what I said, let's just go to one more meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And, you know, we can send things.
If we start getting withdrawal symptoms, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know, if anybody feels an urgent need for a meeting, you can certainly just send out the signal.
Right.
We'll try to set one up. So, we have 10 minutes to go. Does anybody
So
have
maybe we
anything
can,
else? Yeah, why don't we just take a look at those for the next 10 minutes? Alex? Okay, who wants to do that? Let's see.
I'm happy to move the sheets.
All right.
well, do we all have them in front of us?
I didn't print them out.
I-
David's, actually, David's.
So I've got it, we can
Yeah.
share. Can we just do it with what's in front of us?
It's fine with me.
You've got it in front of you too?
Actually, I don't. But-
Right here.
Okay.
But
Wait,
for,
it doesn't matter, it
for
doesn't
the
matter.
sake
Yeah, I'm
of
sorry.
people who may be watching, why
Why
don't we
don't we
just
do 'em
read
in
them
order?
one at a time?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Just reading through and walking through them?
How did you want to review them?
I didn't.
Oh, I thought you said
Well,
you did.
No,
Why-
that
why
was the
doesn't
committee's
somebody read
wills.
them out
I
and
just,
then see what ones either, some of them already implicit in our recommendations. For example, like the first bullet, I think,
Yeah.
could very well be in.
Right.
And are some of them, do any of them really merit being added as a separate bullet to the ones or? But I do agree, all of these should appear as another appendix.
Yeah.
right.
So
Like we
under
do
the
with our
first
other
one,
form.
I mean,
Yeah.
do we want to just quickly read them through and?
So I guess I think all these lines that we have on point number 1 should not be incorporated into our bullet points, which should simply be observations.
What, could I review that creating ad hoc committees struck a chord when we did it? What was that? Asking the,
If council can make ad hoc committees, it was
Well,
simply a
no.
question.
I mean, Daryl had a kind of more specific thing, which is if it could be done kind of like, if there was a petition brought forth to create an ad hoc committee presented to the city council of a certain number of people, could they then,
set up a procedure
Didn't you do-
for
did
making the city
Somehow we
council.
came about
And that's essentially
Is that what?
how we got created.
Yeah.
Right.
right,
For
I guess he
instance.
wanted to formalize it though, is that, having a petition
Oh,
requiring a
so it
certain
would
amount
have
of
to be
people.
responsive to a petition? Is that what you're
They
saying?
would have to,
Right.
respond to it, or that, that there's a procedure for creating ad hoc committees if there's enough demand for it.
I thought that, it struck me as an interesting idea to
Mhm.
formalize the process. And again, we're just making recommendations.
So then the question would be, do we want in our specific bullet list under 1, council should consider creating a process to responding to citizen demands for an ad hoc committee?
I'm leaning more towards the idea of just adding these.
Well, let's go through them
Yeah,
and see
because-
if there's anyone that gets consensus.
Yeah.
Right. I
Because
mean,
that, I agree with this lot, yes.
They should all be appendages, not incorporated.
Well, I'm not sensing we're gonna have consensus that,
Right.
yeah, we really need to add.
But
Well,
I think
just
those,
very quickly, if we were to take the thing about public comment sessions, or, the counselors should respond, I don't think we'd reach consensus on that. That the at a city council meeting, the councilor should respond to people who have presented something. I don't think we could reach consensus on
We might all agree they shouldn't.
that.
Well,
But still, saying, somebody brought that up, I think
Yeah.
that it merits, some kind of recognition.
One
That's
of,
why
if
I'm
we're-
saying just adding it in.
one of the things that came to my attention, and you counselors probably know this, but the counselors can recognize a member of the public during the meeting to have them speak. And perhaps
And we
what
often do
we
that.
could do is acknowledge that that exists.
Mhm.
It's somewhere in the document,
Yeah.
as opposed to make a recommendation
Right.
saying, here's the opportunity for this to happen. It does exist.
Yeah, so if my constituent, Jesus says, I want to get up at the council floor and
He's
talk
gotta
about
go like
this
this
or
in
that,
front of
then I
you.
can make
Right.
a motion to recognize
Right.
Jesus to talk about whatever's on his mind.
Well, if we're gonna just attach these then as an addendum, then I think that we should make that particularly at the bottom one, creating ad hoc committees, a little more clear.
Yeah, and when I wrote these down, it was just to tag that as a recommendation and not to fully explain it. I think the comment was in the text, and there might be more, so I agree. I think that was not intended to be the definitive explanation. It was just, okay, this is what we heard. I suggested around creating ad hoc committees. And I definitely think that those should be looked at whenever the council get around to examining rules, to here were some suggestions to improve the rules. Okay.
And you say there would be a committee where people would be able to participate and explain what it is that they meant by that, and then have that committee make a recommendation.
The current ordinance committee could be charged with doing
Mhm.
that.
Okay.
City school, open enrollment. I think I heard something about, your comment was, can you attend one or two as opposed to having
That was
to?
someone else's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jesse, you
Jesse.
said just drop in without having to have to attend
Yeah.
all of the sessions.
I like that idea, to allow people to, respectfully let people know you're coming or whatever so that they're prepared or whatever, but to all or nothing, I think makes it a hardship for
Yeah.
people who might get something out of it and
Right.
give something back to the community, so. I'm just thinking if maybe we could do something, like commentary on these, little commentary, that we might wanna do that, for instance. Well, let's just keep going. I'm keeping track of what we're saying. But,
Cooperation needed between the mayor's office and the city council. Isn't there? I thought that they were right in sync.
What,
I don't remember that one. I mean, I
Well, that was, I think, following the city school versus the best practices. That talking about what is, the city school is reflecting what is currently being done. And best practices is how things should be done, and not to have the two go off on separate directions. That there should be some interaction, cooperation between recommendations and how things are being done.
Number 3 there, obviously.
Number 2, we
people are-
agree, we're just gonna have them as comments afterwards, not put in the bullet points, is that right?
that was my
I don't see,
recommendation.
I don't see any motion to adopt it.
Okay,
but,
all right.
I guess I would like to, under city schools, say,
Consider making city school,
consider allowing people to participate in some, if they can't participate in
yeah, the
all.
way it's structured now is they do
Yeah, how
they
does it
do a
work?
first meet. Well, they've only done it once, so maybe. But the way they did it the first time was they had an open overview kind of a meeting. So if you just wanted to get like the
Right.
Cliff Notes version, anybody could come to this first
Uh-huh.
one, and they did kind of like a real 2 or 3 hour version of it.
Mhm.
And then the people who signed up then do the the more extensive, like 8-week or 12-week. There's actually a guy blogging about it. I think Andrew Shefflow. I think.
Mhm.
I don't know
But
he's
if you didn't sign up.
But if you didn't
couldn't
sign
go
up-
to any other session.
That's right. That's yeah. And I think they modeled it after the citizens police.
Right, well,
Academy,
that's a
but
whole,
that
that's
doesn't
really
mean that,
different.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. So, because we
So-
have a recommendation in there now saying
It's a good idea.
expand it and include possibly videotaping. So you know,
How about making it more flexible?
So I was gonna say
Just
more
add that as our
accessible.
comments on it.
I agree.
Yeah. I do
More
too.
accessible,
Yeah,
Yeah.
flexible,
flexible.
accessible and flexible.
Yeah, both.
Do we have?
so what-
Is everybody on?
So is
Yeah,
that
so city school, we wanna make more flexible and accessible.
Right.
Yes.
And if they need to understand more, well, you guys know what we're talking about.
Okay. So we just agreed to add that as a bullet to our recommendation.
Or put it in-
or
incorporate
and
into
onto
the-
our city school comment
Yeah.
already.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
because we could say expand and make more flexible or
Right.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
yeah. For, you know, different levels of participation, something like that.
Great.
The rest in the, okay.
This I'm in favor of adopting as a recommendation to consider making all city budgets, the city budget itself and the budgets of each department readily accessible to the public in great detail. I don't know, if line by line is the thing, but right now people have somewhat limited access to those.
And that is one
That's
of our
just exactly
recommendations.
what we
Yeah.
asked for.
Okay,
That's what, that
then
is
we
one
need
of our
not,
recommendations.
I knew I heard it somewhere.
And there's a separate recommendation about the DPW
Yeah.
having a
Right.
better budget.
The only thing is sort of the quasi-public, the Forbes and
Yeah, we didn't talk
Right.
about that.
Forbes, the Academy of Music. I mean,
I mean, they're in the budget. They are in the budget, but so I don't know quite. I'm not sure what they. I'm not quite sure how you tease that out even more. But
Excuse me, we're at 7:45.
Okay, we gotta go, huh?
So I know there are things still pending, but I think we need to adjourn.
I say we just add as is, no more, don't add anything to the points for this one, just to close it out.
okay.
I'm sort of held up on the third thing because there has been over the years so much comment about the quasi-publics, the Academy and the Forbes that I'm just not saying anything particular except I'm a little hung up there with letting it go by. So
Yeah, and also
I just would like to
specific
revisit.
information on the budget for the enterprise funds that the DPW
That
has.
is, that's our recommendation
That is
already.
in our
Oh, okay,
recommendation.
it
yeah.
is in the recommendation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure we did.
I think the
Oh, yeah, the
enterprise
Board of
funds
Public Works.
It's
should go
just
over.
so-
includes a clear
Enterprise funds,
explanation
yeah.
of enterprise funds they oversee.
Right.
Yeah.
So. the
So you're
meeting is
gonna let us
adjourned.
know, get the date figured out.
I'll do
Who are you
it
gonna call?
tomorrow. I'm gonna call Bob Ross.